Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode, wherever in the world you are listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on. As I say every week, thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you guys for sharing this, for the kind messages that you're leaving, and also for the requests that you guys have left, particularly for this topic. One of the things that I really like to get into in some of the episodes, especially for those of you who've been listening for a while, are more of the minutia and more of really honing in on very specific topics and very specific things related to the game of basketball. And that's kind of led me to the idea of wanting to dedicate a whole episode just on the topic of the little details and that idea of refinement and perfection and taking things and just making these little bit of adjustments or a little bit of tweaks, or maybe things that other people don't see, but if you implement them, they can make a difference, a huge one potentially for your players and for your program at large. So this one will be focused on the teaching of those little details, what that'll look like, what are some examples of it, and things that you can implement to hopefully help out your team and help out your program this coming year. So to help discuss this topic, I'm very happy to be joined by quite a busy individual. He's a varsity head assistant coach at Palm Desert High School, a 16U coach as well, out in California. My guest today is Coach Dino Gegic. Coach, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great.
Good. Awesome. I'm doing quite all right. Very, very excited to get into this. I love the idea of like those little refinements and those little tweaks and those little adjustments and kind of perfecting as best we can the art of coaching. So this will be fun. Coach, let's go ahead and get started with your basketball journey. Where is the game taking you and what kind of got you into coaching and the coaching stops that you're at right now?
Yeah, of course. So, I would say I had an interest in coaching basketball even when I was still a player. In high school. Whenever we'd go over plays at practice, I know I would go home and I wouldn't even just be interested in my position. I was always told, the more positions the more potential playing time you can get. So I really made it a habit of knowing what every single person on the floor was supposed to do. And I took pride in that because I felt like it helped me be a better leader on the court too. If you see a teammate is not in the right spot, you can correct them, and just having that ability to know where everyone's supposed to be helps a lot. And it turns out, I guess, my high school coaches also believed I had the coaching potential in me because all 3 of my years on varsity in high school, I won the coaches award at the end of the season, which is basically in their words always, who's the coach on the floor, the extra help on the court to make their job easier. And after awesome. Yeah, so it kind of fit in for me right away. And then, unfortunately, my college playing days, I played a little bit in junior college, but battled a lot of injuries. And I actually had a pretty bad car crash that kind of, for sure, ended my playing career. I can still go up and down the court, but as far as competitively, it's put me a little bit out of shape. So, it was a very nice thing that I could still stay involved in basketball by coaching. And I started my coaching career at my old alma mater and spent about a couple years there as an assistant, took over as the head coach last season. Had a lot of fun. It was definitely not the easiest thing having my first year as a head coach being during a COVID year.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely a lot of hoops to jump through, but it was definitely an experience that taught me a lot of things about perseverance and patience. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of kids that I've known for a while finishing off their senior year. And unfortunately, 10 of my 11 players were seniors. So we didn't have too many kids coming back. So I felt like it was a great opportunity to go join a different high school this upcoming season as a head varsity assistant where, it's a very good program. I'm really excited to be part of it. And with that same program, they have an AAU club that I'm part of. So it's just all tied in pretty well together to continue that way.
And as you made that transition from your previous year to what it is that you're currently doing right now, Did you find that it took a little bit of an adjustment for you to go from the position you were at before to the current ones that you're doing now, or would you find it was a really seamless transition to jump into that varsity head assistant role as well as the 16U role that you do as well?
You know, it was I think it was a pretty smooth transition. I was really grateful for my 1 year as a head coach at the old job. It
Mhm.
definitely taught me a different perspective. I've been an assistant coach for many years, but it definitely is different when you're in charge of a program.
Sure.
And now going over to a different program that's very well kept. They do a good job of fundraising, and some things are easier for them than the last location I was in. It's nice to kind of be a part of a place that's well run like that. And being the head coach for the 16U still kind of gives me that feeling like, okay, like there's a team that I am the head coach for. That's still nice, but I definitely am still happy to be involved even as an assistant coach.
Excellent. Yeah, it's great that happens. I know sometimes the transition when you kind of go from one role to the other can be a little bit like just different because of the responsibilities change and the what's expected of you is a little bit different. But no, that's awesome that things are going really well with that. And I'm curious before we transition into our topic about what is it like on the 16U circuit, because you're working with younger guys in particular, you're working with players obviously 16 and under. What are some things that, as you kind of stepped into that role, because you stepped into that role relatively recently, what were some things that kind of jumped out to you right away that you wanted to really work on with those particular players and really kind of want to get them going on right away once you join that particular 16U club?
Well, I would say like my first step was kind of getting to know the players.
Hmm.
It's a healthy mix of like local high schools out here where we got a few kids from a couple of them. So for most of them, I was just barely introduced to them. So the first couple practices was just kind of seeing what I had to work with and what kid was good at what and how they can get to know each other better and build chemistry. And then after that, it's just it's a little bit tough. We used to only have one practice a week, and a lot of these
Yeah.
kids have summer jobs, so sometimes like some of them can't make it to practice. So it's a little hard to be really implementing plays and stuff like that. So it's a lot of just teaching them basic skills that I like them to run through. And so when we get into game time, even if it's not a play, they just kind of know what the offensive mindset is and the defensive mindset, and just kind of get them on the same page, really.
I'm not gonna lie, that sounds incredibly interesting and maybe stressful at the same time to only practice once a week. Like when it comes to even making a practice plan and trying to figure out how to make the most of all that time, what kind of goes into that for you? Like how do you decide like how am I going to get like everything I need to get in on this week? I know you kind of mentioned how you don't focus on plays necessarily in particular, but what are kind of some elements of absolute like must haves and must do's in practice, considering the fact you only get them for that one time a week?
Yeah, it definitely has to be as an efficient of a practice as
Yeah.
possible. And I really like to take like our previous games an example of like things that I noticed that kind of stand out a little bit more that we need to spend some time on. I mean, you can always set 5 minutes for every single thing in basketball you can think of, but sometimes after experiencing the game before, you see like, okay, maybe this is going to be something we're going to spend a little bit more of our time on. So that's kind of how I go about it. Just reading it and seeing what areas we could just work on a little bit more and making that the emphasis of practice that day.
Yeah, it's always nice when you have a game to work on, right? And there's something that they all participated in, and there's a game that you can kind of build off of and make adjustments to that. So at least you kind of have a reference point going into like the next week or the next game that you guys are going into, like building off what you did previously, right?
Oh, 100%.
So as we transition the idea of teaching little details, this means a lot of different things to a lot of different coaches. So when you think of being a coach that wants to work on, the little details and refining the little things in during the game of basketball, what does that mean to you? How do you kind of define that term, like the little details as it relates to basketball?
I really think of the little details as far as just being very efficient, doing little things that make big differences. And it even can come down to some things you would think like, oh yeah, well, I mean, everyone knows that. That's pretty obvious. But you'd be surprised, like sometimes kids don't close out. Sometimes kids don't box out after a shot. Sometimes kids make a right-handed player go right, and just stuff like that where you think like, just the coach I work with at Palm Desert High School, I like how he puts it. He says, play the percentages. Like if you're guarding a shooter, just putting a hand up, you might have thrown his shooting percentage down 3 to 5%. And that's a help in itself. Sending a right-handed player left, he shoots 10% worse going that way. Just playing percentages, being efficient, just really goes a long way. And that's the little details that I really think can just take a team to the next step.
And I think that this is something then that, as you talked about, kind of going into a new role and a new position that you're in, when you kind of stepped in to the new positions that you're at now, were there certain things you noticed that were like, oh, like that would be something I would want to work on correcting, or here's something that like I noticed that, if the groups that I'm in, that would be really beneficial, like the tweak on. For example, I know one of the situations I sometimes find myself a lot in is you kind of mentioned about players, not forcing their player to their weak hand. And that's something that I really try to correct a lot, because I see it kind of with a lot of the players I have come up with me as an adjustment that like we could easily make. And like you mentioned, play the percentages. So when you were taking over in your kind of new positions recently, were there things that jumped out to you right away that you were like, oh, I can correct this and I can refine this and help the program and help these players out?
Yeah, definitely. As I was, given the position, the head coach told me, a big emphasis he wanted me to have on the team is working with the big guys.
Yep.
And, I'm not necessarily a big guy. I'm about 6'1", but luckily when I was coming into high school, I was the same height as I am now. So all the coaches thought I was going to be like
Yeah.
6'5", 6'6". So my first 2 years of high school, I played center, and I really got a comfortable time of learning how to play in the post, defending the post, getting crafty in the post. Unfortunately, by my junior year, the coaches figured out like, yeah, he's not growing. We're gonna put him out to the wing now. So, but with those 2 years, I really did learn a lot, and being an underclassman, playing with the older guys, that was a great experience too, to really start getting comfortable in the post. So, so the head coach at Palm Desert, he said, his emphasis is, he wants me working with the big guys, and we've been doing it for a couple of weeks now. And my favorite things at the end of the practice, they're like, wow, like I never thought of it that way. Like, oh, like I definitely learned something new. And they'd even go up to him and say like, oh, we're really happy. Like Coach Dino's here helping us. Like we really learned a lot today. And, stuff like that really just makes you feel like you're actually making a difference.
All right, so let's get into that. When you're thinking about working with big men, what are some things that you pick up on right away that you think are just little changes or little adjustments you think that could improve their game?
Two things really, just kind of being crafty in the post, and also just having nice soft touch around the rim. Luckily at Palm Desert High School, the old high school I was at, we haven't really had your traditional big man in a while. We kind of have 6-footers, 6'1" guys, and with Palm Desert, you have now 6'5", 6'6", 6'3", 6'3", 6'4". So it's nice to kind of actually have big men that you can show some moves to. And when they're that big, they kind of lose the touch sense because they're already that close to the rim. Then you'll watch games and they're just missing like really easy looks. And so like a big emphasis I told them is like, what I always taught is when you're gonna go for a layup and you're using backboard, you always want to hit the backboard with the ball going on its way down, and that gives it that soft touch. And I kind of give them those drill where I have them shoot like layup / floaters just right outside the paint to just make them forced to have a little bit more touch than just kind of like finger rolling it off into the backboard. And that just shows them like the angle they're hitting the rim, the backboard is really going to make a difference on how the ball falls back into the rim. And then also I give them examples like Luka Doncic. He's not the strongest, fastest, most athletic, but his craftiness in the paint, his throwing pump fakes, getting that step through, really, showing the ball and going a different way. That's how you're going to free yourself more often than just, trying to be a bully and push through someone. So just adding those two elements to post work, I think really has already made a big difference for some of those kids.
And when you are in general, do you feel that these some of the players that you work with, do you feel like there's a comfort level of them in the post? Because I know I've talked about in previous episodes, a lot of players, they really want to stretch the floor and they're not really comfortable or maybe not used to really the physicality being involved in a post player. Do you find that with the players that you're working for that comfort level is already there and they're good and ready to go down in the low block? Or do you find that you almost have to maybe sometimes even kind of get them comfortable playing in that position, or sometimes maybe it's a mixture of both?
Oh, it's definitely a mixture of both. I have some players who just love to be back to the basket.
Yeah.
And then some players where, I tell them, go from low block to low block, and then somehow they're at the 3-point line. But it's something that, I feel like once they get more comfortable and confident with that post work, they'd want to be in the post more. Like we, when we play against the zone, we'll go high, low, one guy at the high post, one at the low post. And we always say when the high post gets the ball, turn and look and see if that high-low action is there. And we have this one kid who's about 6'4", and he's a pretty decent finisher around the rim. But whenever we hit that high post, he turns to look for him, and somehow he's at the corner 3. So we've talked to him about before. It is easier to just wait in the corner with no one guarding you, but at the end of the day, you can definitely get yourself an easy little 8 to 10 points just slipping back that low side. And once he kind of bought into that, he started realizing like, wow, I'd rather get 4 easy layups than, one kick out 3.
Dad, onto the post work that we talked about, is there anything in particular that you look for in terms of footwork or the way that players kind of maneuver their body when they're in the post? Because I know in some cases maybe footwork might be a little bit of a lost art. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
Oh, definitely. And every different player has their different strengths. If it's more of a bigger bruiser type of player, I always tell them I always love the drop step move, and I always teach once you take a fake dribble to the middle, then you're just gonna sweep that leg around. I like to say heel to heel, really pin that defender's leg, put him on your back, and just an easy layup going out of that. But then you have your players who have a little bit more touch and can kind of spread the floor to the mid-range area. I always tell them if you can, create space and either out of a turnaround or kind of just this little sidestep and get yourself a good look, that's always a great option. And whenever you create space, you always have that step through option with a defender who's going to close out a little bit harder to try and make up for that space you created. So that really kind of ties into the craftiness that I was talking about earlier, when you can just kind of read what the defense is about to do. And if they're going to stay down, you take the shot. If they're going to leave their feet, you make them pay for it.
And depending on the type of teams that you play, some players don't put in a lot of work or don't have a lot of emphasis even on low post defense. So I imagine just having a little bit of footwork about, whether it's the drop step or the way that you maneuver your body or position your body to kind of seal off the defender, you could have just a huge benefit, especially if you play a team that's just not used to ever having to defend down there in the low post.
Oh, definitely. And, the area I coach in, there's not too many big guys out here. I would say it's definitely a luxury to have that at Desert High School. We probably got 4 of the, I don't know, maybe best 5 or 6 big men in the area. So it's definitely going to be an emphasis for us this year to utilize them as much as possible. And having 4 big guys, we've even talked about two of our big guys can kind of stretch the floor too.
Sure.
So there's instances where we can really go 4 big guys in a guard and just really kill it on defense by being long and big. And then on offense, we find that mismatch where one of those 4 guys is going to have the smaller guard on him, and then we just isolate that.
That is, in some cases, a rare brand of basketball that isn't seen too often to see players see the entry that way.
You hear a lot about small ball. You don't hear about big ball anymore.
So with that, then, is there work that needs to be done or things that you look for in terms of, I guess, a couple aspects, the way that a player posts up as well as the entry pass into the post?
Yeah, I've noticed in our last couple games that even with working on some post moves, some of the big guys are still kind of hesitant to really go and demand for the ball, really seal a guy and just call for it. And that's something I've emphasized in practice, saying we're working on these moves. You guys are starting to really get it down, get more comfortable with it. Now you just got to translate it to the game. And with our guards, they've definitely got to start getting a little bit more comfortable too, knowing that all right, this guy wants the ball, let's get it to him, figure out a way to get him the ball exactly where he wants it and let him go to work.
And that's, I've always found is sometimes been a real key point of emphasis that you can tell when it's been worked on a lot, is when that player, that guard, and that post player have that connection where that pass is just on point, or when the post player is getting position and isn't able to get the ball, there isn't a disconnect or any sort of disagreement or animosity between the guard and the post player. And there's kind of that mutual trust and understanding that they're looking to get each other the ball and they're looking to find ways to get the player down low, but it might not always work that way. And it's a beautiful thing. I feel like when you see like those two players who are working together and know exactly where to get the ball, and the player knows exactly where to post up and get position, like, to me, that's always great to watch.
I agree 100%. I think a two-man game with a guard and big is very lethal when run correctly. It can be either, a pick and roll, or, throwing into the post and relocating out for a shot, or just the guard, like you said, just looking for the big man and knowing exactly where he wants the ball and feeding him. When you got that connection between a guard and a big, it can be really dangerous.
So before I lose this thought, I know you mentioned, is circling back to one of the previous answers you gave, about one of the things that you look at is closeouts. So what is it you look for in a closeout, and what are some things that you try to tell and work with your players to kind of refine and clean up their closeout so it's as solid as it possibly can be?
Well, when it's summer ball, you don't have the luxury of, scouting as much. So sometimes really early into a game, you can realize who the shooters are on the opposite team. And I think, kind of getting a recognition of what the opposing player's strengths are kind of factors into how you might want to close out. If it's a player, with a really good first step, I don't think you'd close out as hard. You'd kind of, stop that extra maybe 1 foot earlier just to be able to adjust if they do try going by you. But if they're obviously, knockdown shooter, you can go ahead and overplay it and really make sure they put the ball on the ground and then readjust, stay right in front. I always say, just like I said about the head coach at Palm Desert, how he talks about, just have a hand up. It just helps percentages. Always close out with that hand up. And I always say, when you see a player is going to make a move towards the rim, I've always taught, just take a very quick half step backwards, just straight backwards. So that way, if they go left or right, you're not going to get beat to that spot. You can still stay in front. And that's something I've always taught people. And I know a lot of guards think like, oh, like I have to beat them to the first spot. Like, no, I teach beat them to the second spot. You're not going to be able to always know where that first spot is. But once you see where the first spot is, you know where the second spot is. So if you can beat them to the second spot, it's almost it's a lot better than gambling trying to beat them to the first.
And do you find that you have to work on, are there specific like things you work on in terms of like closeout drills, the ways that you kind of simulate that effectively? And I know you mentioned, especially with summer ball, you don't have, a lot of time, especially practices, as well as seeing the players that you're going up against. So are there things in particular that you work on to simulate that? Or what kind of goes into kind of refining the players and their footwork and making sure they're closing out the way they're supposed to?
Actually, it's been about a month now that I implemented this new drill that is exactly for closeouts, and I like it a lot.
Okay.
It's basically king of the court, but my rules are the throw out pass has to be a solid one bounce pass. It has to get to the offensive player quickly. It's not, that roll it and, go and wait for them to pick it up. You have to go make a solid pass. You have to close out hard. And the rule for the offensive player is you can't shoot the three, and you have to go and attack the second you get the ball. So instead of, you always see like king of the court, you have a guy, pivoting and jabbing for 20 seconds before they finally go.
Yeah.
So it's both, beneficial for the offensive player and the defensive player. For the offensive player, it's like, attack the defense before they're ready. Take that advantage. I've always been told, you're never more open than the first second you get the ball. And so if you don't take advantage of that, you're really allowing the defense to have a easier time to guard you. And then on the contrary, for the defensive player, it's all right, like you're closing out and they're going to attack you. You have to stay in front. You have to learn how to, close out hard enough where you're not going to give up a shot, but also not too hard where all the guy has to do is take one step by you and they're gone. So it's definitely a drill that I'm really happy I've implemented, like I said, about a month ago. And a lot of the kids have like started getting a lot better with their closeouts because of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always nice when you see a good closeout where the defender isn't just, you know, flying right by the shooter and trying to go for a block or something like that, that they can stay down and still stay in position to be able to be able to handle that move. So I'm sure, I mean, you can speak to it too. I'm sure that's probably cleaned up a lot of things, even with some of the work that you've been doing in the summer about staying at home or staying disciplined on the shooters you're closing out on.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, this drill specifically, we don't allow the shots, but since they do work so much harder to get that closeout, it's even translated to when it is against a shooter because they have that aggressive mindset to really get out there.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that one a lot. And I just like again, as I just mentioned before, when those closeouts can accomplish both parts, right? When you can either lower the percentage of that shot or deny that shot completely, or at the very least, the shot isn't there. You're at least still in position that you can recover and play defense. So as both of those things are getting covered, I'm sure we're both happy as coaches.
Yes.
When you think about basketball moves in general, or things that you see happen between individual players on the court that players are doing, I know we spent a little bit of time talking about low post stuff, but are there any basketball moves that you think only really work when a player has been thinking or learning about those little details? Or are there things that you see on the court that make you know, like, okay, that player is thinking and has those little details refined because they're able to, you know, do X, Y, or Z on the court?
Yeah, there's definitely a couple things that can come into mind right away. I think the pump fake is something that, you know, everyone knows what it is, but I've noticed a lot of people don't really have the basics of it down. I've always been taught that a pump fake should look exactly like your real shot up to the point where you're gonna like release it. And that's really the best way to sell it. So if you especially if you have a unique shooting form, and all of a sudden now your pump fake looks way different than your shooting form, no one's really gonna bite on it, you know. And it really comes down to, you got to sell it with the eyes, you gotta sell it with the shoulders, and a lot of components really go into a pump fake, either in the post or on a 3-point kick out. Just kind of selling it really is going to be what makes it effective or not. And then along with that, you know, I think ball fakes, especially against like a zone, go a long way. You can shift 5 players on defense just by faking a pass. And if you can really sell that how you're supposed to, it can clear up another player. So just little details like that. Like I said, like some of it sounds pretty simple. You think like, oh yeah, that's common sense. But I don't know, for some people, once they're in game time, it's like they just kind of forget some of the basics, and you just got to remind them, like, you know, just keep it simple. Just don't force that pass. So fake a pass to make a pass, stuff like that.
What do you think goes into a good ball fake?
Just be able to look a defender off. You know, people look at the eyes. So if you can really convince a player, like, okay, like this is what I'm looking at, this is what I'm going to pass to, they try to tend to, you know, anticipate it. And if you can really get them to buy into that, and you just throw that fake, like I said, you can move a whole defense with a good ball fake, and then that will just clear up the other side. So definitely, both with the pump fake and a ball fake, just selling it with your eyes, I think, is a huge component.
In your experience with the idea of a pump fake, do you find that players aren't doing it, or do you just think that they're just not like doing it well? I ask because I don't see a lot, at least where I'm at and where I'm coaching. I don't even see a lot of pump fakes in general. So I'm not even sure, at least in my area, how much it's even being taught. So I was just curious, in your experience, is it because they don't do it, or they do it, but it's not that convincing and doesn't really fool anyone?
I would say it's a little bit of both. I think the pump fake is definitely a lost art. I think it's a little bit more common in the post because of, you know, the step through option.
Sure.
But even I do have one kid on my my club team who's great at pump fakes on the 3-point line because he is a very good shooter. And when people respect a certain part of your game, then your pump fake definitely works a little bit better. You know, like if you're guarding a guy who shoots 15% from 3, you're hoping they shoot.
Yeah.
You like
sure, go for it.
You're hoping it's not a pump fake. You're hoping like, yeah, go ahead, take it. But when you're obviously, a great shooter, even any closeout, as long as you're showing the willingness to shoot, you're going to get overplayed. And if you can take advantage with a nice pump fake, really get them to leave their feet and just relocate really quickly and get a cleaner shot off, it definitely goes a long way. And I've noticed a lot of people what they're doing wrong in their pump fake is they're trying to do it as fast as possible. It's almost like a quick twitch and then go. And like I said, I've always been told a good pump fake is supposed to look like your shot. And there's no way you're going to shoot it that quick and that out of control. It's got to be fluid. It's got to be a good base. It's got to be a little bit of a ball show. And it can be smooth. I always teach, smooth is fast. If you can do something smooth, doesn't matter how fast of an athlete you are, smooth works. Like I used the example earlier, Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic is an extremely smooth player, and he's smooth that turns into fast.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you that the pump fakes I do see, and we just talked about this before, like some of the pump fakes I do, and I don't see too many though, look nothing like actual people shooting motion. And if we talked about, like, if you're going to pump fake, like it's got to be your shot essentially, and that isn't necessarily mean it's going to be the quickest you can release the ball, because unless you have a super quick release, right, that's not going to be your actual shot motion. So do your actual shot motion as your fake, and that's what people respect. Again, like you said, assuming that you're a good enough shooter that people will respect that you're going to be going up with
definitely
the ball.
If like I said, if you're not a great shooter, they're probably going to want you to shoot, so pump fake might not be the best option.
While we're on the topic, as we're talking about refining those little things, are there things in particular that you look for in a player's shot that you think could potentially be refined in a general sense that could help a player with their shot or their shooting motion?
Oh yeah, I am probably the biggest ever advocate of just having a good arc. I don't know what it is these days, but I see so many kids just have laser shots. And they have good form. They have good form. They have good touch, but so many times it's just a little bit short. Or even if it does look like a good shot, just the angle is so hard and it has to be almost perfect to go in. And even for my big guys, when it's around the rim, I always say, like, don't alligator arm it. Don't leave it short. Like, higher is better. It's better to miss long than it is short. You miss long, you still have the backboard to help you. So yeah, a lot of my kids, I just tell them, like, go work on some form shooting, one hand shooting, and when you're about 3 feet by the rim, exaggerate the height. I know you're never going to shoot a 3-foot floater as high as the backboard, but for right now, really get comfortable with controlling the ball at that height and get fluid with it, and it will translate to way better touch, and you get that friendly shooter's touch like we always hear about.
I'm curious, and I don't know if there's a good answer to this or not, but do you have any theory or hypothesis, I guess, as to why you think shots are flat? Do you think it's just not really working on form, or is it maybe shooting too far at a long distance at a younger age and not like perfecting the actual technique and getting the arc right? Or I'm just curious what your thoughts are as to why that might be something that players are lacking in general.
That's a great question. I don't think I've ever really tried dissecting that, but if I had to just come up with the off the top answer, I would think it's a little bit of the player just trying to be as accurate as possible, and it's definitely easier to get from point A to B in a straight line. So I think in a sense they're like, okay, I see the rim, like I just got to get close to it, like make sure my shot is straight. So instead of really focusing on the touch and the arc, they're just like, all right, let me get it exactly straight and hopefully it goes in. But that's how I would maybe read into it for someone who does have a knack of shooting kind of a flat ball or a laser ball. It just kind of like, all right, like I know, like that's my target, let me try and hit it.
Yeah, I think I think along with that, something that you mentioned as I think about it too, is you use the term, and I've used this sometimes before too, the alligator arms, and kind of just not getting that full release and not really fully extending out. And maybe it's partly that too. You kind of have, like, you short arm it and you don't get the full arc and trajectory that you necessarily are needing to. And I wonder if that has anything to do with it. Again, it's something I haven't really thought a lot either.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point too. And I forgot, actually, I do teach, when after your shot, you want your elbow to be at least eye level, if not higher, which forces that higher release.
Yep, elbow to your eyebrows. I know my girls, if
Yeah.
they roll their eyes when they hear me say it to them, but they haven't forgotten me ever say it to them. So, at
There you
least they
go.
know what I'm saying. But yeah, that's good.
Exactly.
What about ball handling in particular? When you see a good ball handler, what are some little things that either you work on or little things that you see in a ball handler that you're like, okay, this is a good player because they have this particular, movement or ball handling skill down?
Yeah, I think what really separates a good ball handler from a great ball handler is I would say a good ball handler is someone who can protect the ball, not get it stolen. You're confident in them to have the ball in their hands. And then a great ball handler is someone who can actually, get by a defense and
Mm,
create their own shot out of it. And I think the biggest difference between those two is just their ability to really fake and get a defender to bite on that fake. A lot of good ball handlers who can protect the ball, they don't do enough, left to right and enough, shoulder drop and step through with that first step. They're very kind of boxed in, and they do a good
mhm.
job in that box. But a great ball handler, they really can kind of shift the defense out of position and attack that weak side foot now and just really get that first step going forward.
Mm.
So that's definitely what I think really separates a good ball handler from a bad ball handler. The ability to kind of get a little bit wider in their stance and really drop that shoulder, really get that foot first step going forward.
Are there things that you like to work on in particular with players to help out or work on their ball handling?
Yeah, so I'll usually line the kids up either on the sideline or the baseline, depending on what our numbers are looking like, and I'll have every single player with a ball, and I'll teach them. We'll do something like, let's say you're gonna set up with a crossover,
Mhm.
really drop that shoulder, and then we're gonna go between the legs. But on that between the legs, I want that lead foot aggressive going forward. A lot of people, even that kind of have a nice handle, they'll kind of sit in one place and do all their moves. I try and teach them, like,
Yeah.
make your move and go. It like I said, it sounds super simple. It sounds, common sense, but there's a lot of kids who make a great move. They shifted their defense, but then they just stay in the same spot. And
It's
it's
kind
like,
of
all
like they
right,
work on it like almost stationary, and it's like, oh, like
yeah,
what are you gonna
exactly.
do
And
once it works? What's your plan now? You did it. Now what?
yeah, now step B, now you go. So that's why I try in that little ball handling drill, I really emphasize, like, okay, like when you're doing your second move, your counter move, it's got to be a first step aggressive. You've got to really send it forward, and you got to move forward. No more like just standing still. Like, you see a lot of dribbling drills where the kids just stand still, and it's definitely a great ball handling drill as far as getting tighter with your dribble.
Mhm.
But then I like to take that next step and really relate it to in-game situation. Where, like, okay, you made a great move, you got your defense out of position. Now what are you going to do? Now you got to take that step forward, really close them off, put them on your back, protect your layup by extending your arm out, stuff like that. It's just gonna really translate into the game. It's that little details, like, okay, like, yes, you can dribble the ball, but what are you gonna do now?
Well, it's kind of sounds like putting multiple skills in at once instead of necessarily just working on them in isolation. You kind of work on like, okay, here's the ball handling aspect, and then once this you accomplish this part of your goal, like, okay, what do we do now? It's kind of like building those pieces. They kind of see how it all translates into what they'll do on the game versus, working on something in isolation where it's good to work on, obviously, and good to build that skill, but it's also incredibly important that they're able to kind of build and know what to do once they've made their move, for example, to be able to kind of put it all together in that way as well.
Yeah, and I'm very big on as much game like drills you can create.
Hmm.
It's always good, to do the mic and drill. I'm a big fan of the mic and drill. It's always good to just do a single ball or two ball stationary dribbling. It definitely
Yeah.
can build your skills. But then I really like to, as soon as we're done with that, now start translating into the next step. Like, okay, we're going to do the same moves, but now we're going to go past these cones. I want you to take one strong dribble, pull up from the elbow, stuff like that. Just kind of tie it all in together to get them as many reps of like, all right, like this is how it's going to look. This is the full thing we're working on.
Kind of going on that like big picture, like this is where it actually applies into a game
Exactly.
setting.
Exactly.
Now, of course, as much as I'm sure we would like to as coaches to always be there with our players, we know that that's not always possible. So what do you think are things that players can work on, maybe like individually, or adjustments that they can make on their own when maybe they're not around a coach, or maybe even around a gym in some cases? What are some things that maybe you talk about with your players that they can be working on their own time individually, that they're going to make that difference for them and kind of make that little adjustment to help out with their game?
So let's say, for example, like shooting the basketball.
Yep.
I always tell my players who are practicing on the shot, I always tell them, a good player, or a good shooter, when they miss, it's going to be either short or long. But when a poor shooter misses, it's left or right. And that just kind of goes to show, like, if you're missing left or right, it's usually a structure or a form issue that you kind of got to correct. And whenever I tell them, like, okay, like when you do have that really good shot that just swished, you've got to take those mental notes, like, okay, what did I do differently this time that actually made that happen? And the more you can really dissect what it is you do right, or figure out what it is you did wrong and start fixing it, I think that's what really goes a long way, because it's not about just about how many reps you get in, it's about how many good reps you get in.
Yeah.
If you're doing something wrong and you do it 1,000 times thinking like, all right, like the more I do it, the better I'll get at it. No, the more you do it, the more consistent you'll be at doing it wrong.
Right. You're just learning how to do it wrong.
Yeah, you're getting better at doing it wrong. So I definitely tell them, like, if there's something that you see you're doing wrong, or something you need to correct, you've really got to take that time to figure out what the problem is, how to fix it. Once you do fix it, that's what you really got to rep out until it becomes natural. And one of my favorite coaching quotes is don't do it until you get it right, do it until you can't get it wrong. And what that really means to me is, I finally switched the ball. Like, okay, cool, I know I can do it now. Like, no, like, keep practicing until it's like, oh, I hit rim, I'm so disappointed now.
No, I like that at all. That kind of is a compliment. I always like to tell my players that, practice makes permanent. So it kind of goes back to what you said earlier about, like, if you just practice, bad habits, you're going to just permanently, have those bad habits if that's all that you're practicing all the time.
Yeah.
So,
and another thing that kind of goes with that, if you're just practicing the wrong way, I always say, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect.
Yeah, sure.
You gotta practice the right way. You gotta do the correct little things.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you that, you gotta perfect practice. And did you ever tell your players ever, like, to, if they're doing their own reps, to ever like film themselves or stuff like that? I know some coaches really like that, some don't mind. I'm just curious what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I'll even sometimes bust out the phone and turn on a slow motion mode and tell them, all right, like, here we go. Well, I'll take one from the sides, one from behind, one from straight ahead, and let's really see, like, the little components in your shot. Let's see how your follow through looks. Let's see how your foot placement is. Let's see where that elbow is. And it really gives the player a sense of, like, oh, okay, so that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
Sometimes, at least for myself, like, I've never been the most athletic player, but sometimes I'm on the court and I make a move and I was like, wow, like, I felt like, I was so fast. I looked so smooth. And I watched the tape afterwards. I was like, yeah, no, that was not even close to fast. So sometimes you don't really get a sense of, every component of your shot just from just shooting and standing still and just keep taking shots. Sometimes it is nice to take a step back and actually see a video of yourself, and you can see, like, oh, I never noticed I do that. Oh, I never noticed my elbow flares out during my shot. I never noticed, my follow through points left. So it's definitely a useful tool to use sometimes.
Kind of going more big picture, and not necessarily on individual concepts, but a more team concepts. This kind of question just popped in my head. When you think about what you like to run, or what you like to run last year, or even what you're going to be running this year in terms of your offense or your defense, what are some maybe like little details or little things that are, are really important to making the offense and defense work that you either ran last year when you were a head coach or are going to be helpful for what you're going to be running this year?
Well, I would say you definitely have to be open-minded to your to what you have.
Okay.
If you have a bunch of huge long guys, it's a lot different than if you have a bunch of little small guards. And with my 16U team, we don't really have a big. We have
Mhm.
a couple kids who can, play in the post a little bit, but more on the craftier side than it is the big side. And
Sure.
so that kind of sometimes hurts us on defense where we don't really have a good matchup if the opposing team has a solid big guy. But what's really nice about my 16U team is that we're super scrappy. We play super hard. We're super scrappy. We rotate really well. I like to put us in a little 2-3 zone where, anytime they're trying to exploit us with using a big guy, boom, we're getting that second player digging right away when that guy gets the ball. And it really helps us force a lot of turnovers because big guys don't usually like little guys being in their personal space. So it's on the defensive end, we really emphasize like, all right, like we're not the biggest, but we play hard. We get to where we're supposed to be. We don't make anything easy. They're gonna have to earn their points. And then on the opposite side, on offense, you use your weakness to your strength. We don't have a big guy, so what we're gonna do is, we're gonna bring their big guy out, and now we're gonna free up the paint for any guys cutting off ball, or even if that guy being guarded by the guy being guarded by the big guy can now go to work and isolate him on the wing and make a good one move and go.
Do you, as you're explaining these concepts and as we're going on like teaching these concepts, how do you kind of go through the process of kind of letting your players figure out like what are these little details and kind of figuring it out as they're working through it about what works or what doesn't work to, kind of perfect the defense or offense versus you like kind of explaining to them and doing the teaching? What in your experience has kind of been the like, I'm going to explain this to you versus I want you to kind of see it and kind of figure it out and work through it and learn as a team?
Yeah, I would say, like for example, when we're playing a team that has a bigger guy and we know that we can exploit that by bringing him out,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'm hoping that they'll just kind of see that on their own. But if I see a couple of possessions where we're not really trying to isolate the big guy, then I'll call out like, oh, like give it to this guy. And once he gets the ball, I'll say, just go to work, just go. And then they're like, get that sudden like, oh, okay, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm allowed to, yeah, okay. And then they make one move, go get a layup. I'm like you've got to see that. You've got to know. I always teach like you have to know what your advantage is. You're not going to have every advantage, but you got to figure out what your advantage is, and you've got to use it as much as possible. And that's as clear cut of a definition of being efficient as I can think of. Find what it is that you can do to make us better and
Yep.
do it as much as you can. If it's not broke, don't fix it. If you keep getting a layup because you keep going by this guy, don't pass the next play. Keep going until they figure it out.
Mm-hmm. No,
So it's yeah, it's one of those things where it's like sometimes you do have to tell them like, hey, like I know you want to be a team player, but this guy can't guard you. Like you're gonna be a team player if you just keep scoring for us. Like no one's gonna be mad at you if you got a mismatch and you're just getting bucket after bucket. But it's one of those things like you should have that confidence and that IQ to see like, okay, it's not being a ball hog, it's helping my team win.
And that going with that kind of builds you as a coach almost have to build that trust with your player too, that like, hey, like I trust you that if you see this and you want to exploit this, yeah, we might have this offense that we're running, but if the end of the day, right, I want to score baskets. So if this is what's working and you trust yourself and you know that I trust you as a player, keep taking advantage of that and everything is going to be fine. And I think that's great if you have that relationship with your player where they know like, oh, but I see this and I really know I can exploit this. And I also know my coach isn't going to be upset because I'm trying to do what's best for the team by making this decision instead of this other one.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think like, oh, if I take too many dribbles or if I try and be a little too aggressive, and if I make a mistake, it's gonna look bad. And like I'll never be, down on a kid for trying to be overly aggressive. I'll be more mad if they weren't aggressive. I get more mad when it's like, come on, everyone in the crowd, everyone on the court knows like this guy can't guard you, but you're just like, oh, like let me give it to someone else.
Yeah.
Like if I was his teammate, I'd be like, don't give me the ball here, take it back, go score.
Yeah, go be a good teammate by scoring. Even I don't need to touch the ball in that situation. Like, why not? Let them.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. What do you do? Shifting more towards you personally, as a coach, to kind of work on your own understanding of the game, to kind of pick up on these little details and little things that you can share and work on with your players. What kind of goes into your like studying and picking up things in the game? Do you like to watch a lot of film, or did you read a lot, or just trial by error? What's kind of your personal process?
I'm a huge basketball nerd, and I love watching film. I'm a very big stats guy during season. I like to go look into that stuff and see what it is we do good and what we can work on. And then I'm always open to learning new things. On Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, I follow so many coaches pages or pages about trainers, or pages that show, like college plays that really worked this last season and breaks it down. It's one of those things that, like, not everything is for everyone, but with so much information out there, you're gonna find stuff that really works for you or that really clicks for you. And I am always open to getting better. I'm not one of those people like, oh, like this worked for me last year, it's gonna work for me forever. People adjust. You're not gonna have the same personnel. It's the more options you have, the more dangerous you are. And I've always been a firm believer of that. Like I said, like growing up, like, the more positions the more playing time you can get. It just the more the more potential you have to be good at what you do.
Do you have a particular process that you go through when it comes to looking at film, or do you look at it all in one session? Do you look at multiple sessions? Or are you somebody who's taken notes, or what's kind of your film process as you're looking at film? Because I know everybody kind of has their own way that they go about doing it. So I was curious about what yours was.
Yeah, if it's looking at our own film and seeing what we can do better, I mean, the topic of this podcast, the little details. It's about, if we keep trying this one thing and it's not working, and I notice, like, when we do try this one thing, this next option is actually something that we could try out. I'll make a note of that, and once we do like a group film section, I like to ask questions. I don't always like to just give answers to the kids. Sure. I want them to kind of think for themselves a little bit and see if they can recognize these things on their own. And I think that really develops them as players as well. And so I'll pause film at certain points and see, like, all right, like at this point right now where everyone is, what do you guys think would be the best option here, or who should we be looking for, or where is a point in this play where you can see we could have done something different, and just kind of having them dissect it on their own. And even sometimes they might say something that I didn't even think about that's actually a great read, and it kind of helps me out too. But just helping the players kind of start thinking for themselves and building their basketball IQ by doing that, I think also just automatically makes them better players. Mm-hmm. So I like doing film sessions like that, really going play by play and giving the kids a opportunity to show me what they see too. And then if I'm scouting, doing the opposite, scouting someone else and seeing what it is they like to do, I just look at patterns. If their shooter, once he doesn't take a shot, is forced to put the ball on the ground, goes right hand only. Now we know if we close out hard and sit on the right hand, we've basically taken them out of the play. Or if they have a really good lefty who likes to shoot whenever he goes left, we know to really play that left side and expect a shot, stuff like that. Just seeing patterns and tendencies and really being prepared when it goes into that game.
I love just the whole concept of just breaking down film in general and just looking at things, picking up on tendencies, and I'm of that mind. I know that it is possible that you can overwhelm yourself with film, but I also don't think there's such a thing as being like too prepared. And that's like, I'm the kind of person, I just want to know everything. I want to be able to like see everything, 100%. Pick up on everything.
100%.
I don't know about you, but I always hate that feeling of not being prepared for something or seeing something and being like, wait a minute, how come I didn't recognize this or know this was going to happen? Or, oh man, I can't stand that feeling personally. So I totally get it.
I 100% agree. It's such a good tool to have. Just
Yeah.
Film is something that we didn't do too much when I was in my playing days.
It's
And I
never been
really want to
easier
make
now.
it. Yeah, and with Huddle and everything, it's like all the kids have access. You can, even go in and draw on the film directly. So even if you don't have an opportunity to meet as a team in person, you can send them out the film, or you're pointing out certain things from the clip drawn on. And so it's just a good skill to have. And being prepared, I mean, it's night and day what kind of outcome you can expect.
Mm-hmm. Before we hit our concluding segment, I wanted to make sure if there was any other like drills or any other things that you like to work on that we didn't get a chance to, or have you explain or talk about that you had that opportunity. So is there anything that you like to do that we missed or we didn't cover?
I think the mid-range game is a really lost art.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you heard the Ray Allen drill. It's about, going elbow to elbow. And for every make, you get 1 point. And for every miss, you get -2 points. And so the challenge is you're trying to get to positive 10 points before you hit -10 points. And every kid I show that drill to just falls in love with it right away. It's a fun game to challenge themselves where they can like do it with one friend. They just take turns, and then usually they don't make it their first couple times, and then finally on that third or fourth time they come up to me like, coach, I finally got it. I did it. I got the 10. So it's always nice like giving kids a drill where they just automatically fall in love with it. And it's nice seeing that they buy into it and see like how much it helps, and it forces them to really like value every shot. Because if you start missing, you get on a little bad streak, man, that's -6 points right there. You got a long way to go to make it up. So they definitely learn to value it and really work on their form and really follow through and hit that shot.
Yeah, I might have to share that one. Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, it's a fun one. And then for my big guys, I have this drill called gorilla drill. It's a little chaotic, but it's really fun. And every kid I have go through it, they love it and hate it at the same time. It's basically you get three big guys or like-sized guys in the paint, and you start off with a shot. And from after my first shot, the ball is live until the end of the drill, and it's first player with 3 made layups wins. So I tell them you can be a little bit aggressive. You can hack a little bit. Obviously, don't swing too hard or hurt someone. But the point is, be aggressive, give the guy a little bit of a bump, and even after the layup goes through, the ball's still alive right away. So if you can make a layup, get the ball back, make a layup, get the ball back, make a layup, you win the drill. Nice. But with 3 guys fighting for the ball, it really teaches you like, okay, like they're going to be aggressive. They're going to be bumping a little bit. I have to value every attempt I get, because if you miss one attempt, you don't know when you're going to get the ball back. And you don't know if you're going to make that next one or not. So you really got to value every possession. And the nice part is it teaches you that to value every shot. And it's a great conditioning drill. You got 2 other guys trying to bully you down there for 2 minutes straight. Everyone's gassed at the end, but they love it.
Oh, that's excellent. Appreciate you sharing that, though. Those are some fun ones too, especially that conditioning aspect at the end. It's definitely who's got the will to kind of keep going and keep finishing in a drill like that. No, that's really cool. To wrap up, Coach, there's a couple of questions I ask every guest. So I'll go ahead and start here with this first one. Thinking back on your coaching career, what is a coaching moment from your coaching career that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
So this last season, when I was the head coach at my old position, in a span of 1 week, we had a game where we were down about 6 points with a minute left. We did a great job of pressing and getting some turnovers and finishing some big time shots to tie the game up with 7 seconds left. And the other team was inbounding. They tried throwing a full court pass. One of my players picked it off and immediately called a timeout. So it was our ball with about, let's say, 5 seconds left, full court to go, right? And so, out of the timeout, I say, we got the full court to go. It's 5 seconds. Let's, get the ball into the hands of one of our better players. You have free range. If you can get a great look, let's go for it. If you see a player open, let's try and hit him going forward. But 5 seconds left. Our only mindset is let's try and get a good clean shot off, and let's get the last shot off. Let's not give them a chance to do anything crazy now, right? And so we inbound the ball with about 5 seconds left. For some reason, this player takes one dribble towards the sideline, sees a kid coming at him, jumps up in the air, throws the ball backwards to our inbounder. Ball gets stolen, and the team scores a game-winning layup at the buzzer.
Oh, wow.
Just heartbreaking, right?
Mm.
Fast forward to our next game. We're up 1 with about 2 seconds left in the game. The opposing team is taking out under the basket they're scoring. They set up a really good out of bounds play to get a wide open look for their player. He shoots it. I mean, it had to have been more than halfway down and popped right back out, and the buzzer rang, and we ended up winning that game.
Huh.
So it's one of those things that I really learned a lot from that week is, you're going to have really great highs. You're going to have really bad lows, but you just got to keep moving forward. You got to be ready for the next day. You can't dwell on it too much. You can fix the problems that may have caused that outcome, but the longer you focus on it, it's not going to change anything. You've got to move on to the next play, next game, next practice, next day. No matter what it is, it's about perseverance and just understanding. One shot isn't going to define your career. One shot's not going to define more than anything other than maybe that one game.
Wow, you talk about a bit of a roller coaster, and then
the nice part was. The game we won was on my birthday, so I told all the kids, like, listen, I don't know if we deserve that one, but that was my birthday wish for today, and I used it. I'm happy about it. I'll take it.
Wow. But it I mean, having those experiences so close to each other just kind of reminds you to kind of keep a level head, right? The highs and lows, and just
Exactly.
Be aware, like, hey, just do the best you can, and it'll work out the best way it can. Sometimes the breaks go your way, and sometimes they don't. Wow, that'd be something to experience personally. So I don't know how it
was a fun week. I remember when that kid shot the 3 for the game winner. It just looked clean the second it left his hands, and I just remember in my head I was like, not again.
Yeah.
And then the luckiest, I'm telling you, it was more than halfway down. Somehow it rolled out, and I was just thinking in my head, like, I'll take it.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Coach, to wrap up, I give every guest what I call like a 60-second soapbox. Feel free to go longer. I'm not timing you. Your platform to get out a final message, a final thought, just kind of a closing idea that you want to leave the listeners with. So I'm just going to kind of give you the floor, and I'm just going to kind of let you take it from here.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I'm a huge basketball nerd, and I feel like what really helped me be the coach I am today is just loving the game. And it's either, watching basketball, playing basketball, reading about basketball, anything I can do that really implements myself into as many things as possible that can widen my understanding of the game. I really think as a coach, it's made a huge difference for me. I have a very unique experience in high school. 4 years of high school, I had 1 year of JV and 3 years of varsity. All 4 years of high school, I had a different high school coach, and not many people had that experience. But I think in a way, it's actually helped me as a coach, because you see a lot of different coaching styles and mindsets and strategies, and it's definitely made me more of a well-rounded coach, even as a player back when I was playing, but it definitely stuck through to me as a coach too. So for anyone who really loves the game and wants to get better, I think really taking that step of, all right, you really got to be a student of the game. You can say you love basketball, but do you only love, like when you're playing and you're doing good, or do you love it when you struggle and you want to get better as well? And I think that's really what is the next step of defining what you want to be as a basketball player or as a coach.
Nice. And that kind of perfectly ties into what our topic was about how much work you're willing to put in on those, little details and really refining and getting down to the nitty gritty and making those adjustments to your game. So it kind of puts a bow on all of that. That's really good.
Yeah, exactly. And example I always like to use is like, let's say, we just had a game and we lost by 12 points. You might not think, oh, that's not that close, but it's also not a blowout. But if you really break it down to the simple things, if you just as a team made those 3 easy layups you should have made, but you missed, and you boxed out 3 times in that whole 4-quarter game that they actually got a second chance point out of, that's a tie game. Take 6 away from them, add an extra 6 to you. That's a 12-point turnaround, and it's crazy to think like, oh, those little things would have made that big of a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. They all add up, right?
Oh yeah.
Coach, I want to thank you for taking some time to talk about the whole idea of teaching little details and little things that players can work on, or even on a team concept to kind of improve themselves, and also you sharing about things that you like to do yourself to kind of work on improving your own understanding of the game and improving your way of coaching it to your players. So I know that you're busy and you got a lot still going on with AAU, as well as your new position as well. So I look forward to you continuing to build that momentum and continue to do all the things that you're doing and all the great coaching that you're doing. So thanks for spending some time, Coach, and best of luck going forward. Thank you.
I really appreciate it a lot. Thank you so much.
And thank you all for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast, and we will see you guys.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.